I want to introduce Erica Tranny, our Erica. Yay, Erica. Many of you know her already, but for those who don't, Erica is the founder of In Exchange, the fair trade store, which is actually, you might have seen it in the LBC Center here on the first floor. As if she didn't have enough to do, in 2007, this was her senior year at Tulane, she was in international development and political science, graduated in May 2007, and the store, she had the store opened by October 1 in 2007. We can all take lessons from her. In addition, I wanted to mention that Erica Tranny was the Newcomb Alumni Association Young Alumna of the Year for this year. Erica?
Thank you for that introduction. I wasn't expecting such a fancy introduction. But just so everyone knows, the store is open right now. My boyfriend is running it, so you can all check it out. It is my very sincere pleasure to introduce to you the leaders of the successful microlending website, Kiva.org. They are co-founder and CEO Matt Flannery and President Premal Shah. Matt Flannery and Premal Shah felt a calling to use their advanced backgrounds in technology and business to expand microlending around the world. Mr. Flannery began developing Kiva in late 2004 as a side project while working as a computer programmer at TiVo, Inc. In 2005, he left his job to devote himself to Kiva full-time. Mr. Shah was a principal product manager at PayPal and a strategy consultant at Mercer Management Consulting in New York before coming on board in 2006 to lead the scaling of Kiva's partnerships and member base. Today, just a few short years after the organization's inception, the word Kiva is rolling off the tongues of nearly every person interested in poverty alleviation in this country. Kiva.org is a remarkable breakthrough in that it gives everyday people the opportunity to lend money to disenfranchised, aspiring entrepreneurs in economically developing countries. Because of its compelling mission and strong leadership team, Kiva has experienced inspiring and rapid development since its founding in 2005. In 2008, 50,000 loans were given, accounting for half of the total 100,000 loans that Kiva has transacted in the year since its beginning. Kiva has been featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show and was named the Idea of the Year by the New York Times. Please join me in welcoming to the summit the leaders of Kiva.org, Matt Flannery and Premal Shah.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to thank you for having me here. I'm really, really excited to be here with Premal. It's kind of bizarre that I'm wearing a tuxedo, and Premal is too. We're actually going to a fundraiser right after this. It's actually in Miami, of all things, and it's about empowering women. So this is a day for two guys, Premal and I, wearing tuxes, to be speaking about women's empowerment. And, it's a topic very dear to our heart, so we're happy to do it. And we look a little awkward in these tuxes, so just forgive me for that. They're also a little big. I had to call them in. I called Men's Warehouse from San Francisco 2 days ago, and they asked me for my size, and I didn't know, because I'm not used to getting a tux, so I just said, make it a little bit bigger than you think. And so it's a little bit better to be bigger, I think, than have a tux that's too small. So that's what we did. We're a little bit baggy here. I'm going to start the talk by just introducing Kiva, what we do, and how the organization works, and a bit of our past. And then Premal's going to talk a little bit more about women's empowerment and how that ties into our business, because it's absolutely critical to make Kiva work. So thanks for having me. This is a picture of myself in Cambodia. I was actually in Cambodia in October last year and got to meet a lot of the entrepreneurs that are supported through Kiva. And most of them, as we'll talk about, turn out to be women. The women are typically the financial rock of their household and the lead business people in their household, and the man is more of an executor, oddly enough, but the woman's the one that keeps the books. She's like the CFO of the family. So what happens is micro-lenders, microfinance institutions are small banks for poor people that lend small amounts of money to primarily women to help them scale their business and help their family grow and help send their kids to school, buy healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. So that's me getting the joy of actually visiting one of these women. She was a weaver, and I got to see her weave her loom, I guess what they say, underneath their house. So these people live usually in floodplain houses on stilts, and below the house is their workshop. And when it's not the rainy season, they actually just work under the house, and they do their weaving. And so this is actually her daughter who is weaving a roll of silk. She buys the silk from a middleman that comes to an island. She actually lives on an island right outside of the capital city in Cambodia, and the middleman comes to her, gives her, sells her raw silk, and then she and her family use that to create these elaborately woven rolls of silk with these really, really interesting and intricate designs on them. And in order to buy the silk, they need banking services. It's actually a lot of money to buy a lot of silk at once, so you need a small loan, maybe a $500 loan, to buy enough silk to give to your daughters who weave the silk all day into these looms for 7 days in a row. It takes about 7 days to make just one of those rolls, and they sell that roll for about $60 to that same middleman who comes and collects it at the end of the week, and then it gets shipped off to who knows where, maybe the USA. Oddly enough, exports are declining, and these people are coming under hard times because they're very much dependent on us. They're very much dependent on Westerners who buy silk clothing, who buy silk decorations, and because of the economic downturn, the exports of silk have actually declined. And so it's very interesting. I was out there watching how the world is so connected. We're all so intricately woven together in this world. And a financial crisis that started with a failed mortgage, maybe in Louisiana or maybe in California, ended up with a bank that collapsed, ended up with spending power that declines, and women in the rural places in Cambodia unable to sell their silk. I just found it a really striking and interesting example of how we're all connected. In a sense, it's very sad, but in a sense, it's very, it's an amazing fact that the daily actions that we take here affect people half across the world, and it's actually a hopeful thought in many ways. I'm going to start a little bit, just tell the story of Kiva. Kiva is a small business. It's about 4 years old. I started it with a co-founder, and my co-founder and I were on a trip to Africa, and we were volunteering in microfinance. So we decided to take time off of our daily lives and to take a sabbatical. I was a computer programmer, and I was a little bit burnt out. So I took some time to volunteer in Africa and visit small business women and men and tell their stories. So it was a little bit of like an interviewer. I was doing poverty assessment. So I was asking people, do you take sugar in your tea? Do you have a mattress in your house? In Uganda, a good way to tell if someone's in poverty is not to ask, do you own a home, or what's your household income, questions that you would ask in the USA, because people typically don't know their household income, and they don't really own their homes either. It's not the same idea of ownership there. So you have to ask questions like, do you have a roof on your where you live? Is there a roof? Do you have a mattress where you live, or do you sleep on the floor? Stuff like that. And so that's what I was doing, and I got really, really inspired to tell these stories to my family and friend, because it was a different take on poverty than I had ever been exposed to. So I grew up thinking of Africa as a place of despair and a real barren place where people, babies are starving and there's war all the time. And those things are true. There is a lot of war there. There is a lot of starvation. But more so than that, the thing I was struck with was hope and inspiration, and just amazed at people's stories and how they were actually making progress. A lot of people were making progress and they had big hopes. And so I wanted to tell that story to the people I knew, and I used the internet. Being a software engineer, I used the internet to help tell those stories. And then pretty soon, instead of just telling the stories, we were actually enabling people to make small loans to those business women in Uganda through the website. And my friend in Africa would just get the money out of the bank and deliver $100 to this $100 to this fish seller, $100 to this flower seller, $100 to someone that was doing goat herding. And they had these businesses, and they actually paid back the loans, and I actually got the money back to my checking account. And I was just doing it all through my own banking account. It was little amounts of money. And over the course of a year, it started to get popular, and it started to become more of a serious thing rather than just a hobby or a nice experiment. So I tried to take this seriously as a real business. I started walking around Silicon Valley. It's a very entrepreneurial place, and I talked to venture capitalists and foundation people, and I got a lot of critical feedback. They said, that can't scale. That was the main thing I heard. They said, how can you have a business where people's pictures are on the site and you're getting them from Uganda? And how do you know that those women are going to pay you back? You can do it with 5 friends, sure, but you can't do it when you have thousands. It's not a real business, so that won't scale. Other people said, that's illegal. They said, you can't just lend money over the internet, and people will regulate that, and the government will shut you down. Whether it be the Homeland Security Act or the SEC shutting you down, you'll get shut down. So I had this big fear of men in suits coming to my door and literally shutting me down one day, so I was sort of backed off for a time. And then a lot of other people, just sort of normal, my family, my friends, normal people, said, that's bad, because that's not charity. I mean, you're trying to help these women, but you're asking them to pay you back. That's not right. You shouldn't do that. You should give them charity. And so a lot of people found it distasteful to sort of partner with an entrepreneur in Africa in a business context, not necessarily just a charity context. But we heard these worries, and we decided to keep going. And about that time, I met Premal, who came from eBay, and we had a lot of similar ideas. And so I actually convinced him to quit his job too. We both quit our jobs around the same time, and we decided to take on these naysayers and just see if it would work. And we had no funding, but we had a lot of energy, and we had a lot of friends that could really help us out. And so basically, I went from my job, my TiVo office, where I was working in my cube at TiVo, to a donut shop down the street. Well, it was our first office. So we spent long nights, long weekends working at this donut shop. It had Wi-Fi down the street. We wrote the entire transaction database of Kiva, the system, how it works. We signed up partners, field partners, microfinance institutions. We signed them up in Africa from the donut shop. And then we actually got an office. So about 3 years ago, we got our first office. And we're still in the same neighborhood, but we're a lot bigger now. We're about 40 people work at Kiva now. The thing that made Kiva work early and work so fast was we got a lot of press. So we didn't have a venture capitalist give us $10 million. We didn't have a charity give us $1 million to help us grow. So what we had to do is get press. And we spent a lot of time trying to get the press, and it just hit us like this big hurricane, and all of a sudden we were overwhelmed. Our loans got sold out on the site. We couldn't keep the site up. It was just constant, very, very hectic for at least over a year, just with all these technical difficulties. When someone like Oprah mentions you on television, it can just rip your site apart. So that's my main piece of advice. Come see me if you're about to get on Oprah. We work in the world of microfinance. So how many of y'all have heard the word microfinance? That's what I suspected, so I don't really need to explain it. But essentially, microfinance is the discipline of providing banking services to the world's poor. And when I say banking services, it's not just loans. So we've all heard of the Muhammad Yunus model, lending in Bangladesh to small businesses, women, $60 at a time. That's the credit, that's microcredit, that's part of a larger movement. But also, there's insurance products and savings products and a whole realm of banking products that microfinance institutions provide to people, mostly women. So on our site, it's about 75% women. And I didn't know that getting into it, but it's a quite sexist industry. In a good way, though. There's reasons for that, and Premal will talk about that. Microfinance is a growing field, but that has a big problem, which is there are way, way too many small business entrepreneurs in the world that are hard to reach. They're far from a city. They are not used to accounting. They're not used to banking. And so it's a sector that's very promising, but there's a huge supply and demand problem, meaning there are way too many people in the world that could use banking services that are totally, totally left out of that. And so we have a long way to go, and there's a lot of funding needed to make that happen. You have to pour liquidity into the sector so the banks can get loans and then reloan, you know? And that liquidity doesn't always exist. And in our time, actually right now, it's tightening. You know, there's a lot of tightening of lending in the world. So microfinance institutions are having difficulty expanding because they're not getting the liquidity that they need. So we created Kiva, which is a person-to-person liquidity engine. So it's a way that people can liquidate small amounts of money, $25 at a time, and provide it in the form of debt to the world's working poor. So that woman, Donna Brazil, can actually lend $25 and it'll make it to that seamstress over there in Ecuador. How did we do that? We used technology. So we used the internet to create a marketplace, essentially, a little bit like eBay, where Donna Brazil can view someone's loan profile, someone in Cambodia, a weaver. She can view that and she can actually lend money. For some reason, she got right on the slide in the middle there. You see that? Right there? I don't know how she got there. She's not on our site, unfortunately. That's an error. I made this about 5 minutes before. She's big and small, I guess. Glad she's not here. But anyway, she can actually, if she wanted to, she can go on our site. She can browse a loan application of a silk weaver in Cambodia and make a small loan to that silk weaver. And that money will actually get there. So Kiva's sending all of the money, 100% of that money, to that entrepreneur. We do that, you know, that entrepreneur does not have a PayPal account. They don't have a bank account. So what we need to do is work with a partner, an NGO in Ecuador that she can go to get the small loan, the loan that was funded by Donna Brazil, essentially. So we have MFIs, microfinance institutions. We have MFI partners that use our website all over the world. We have about 110 different field partners that use the website from 40 countries. Premal worked at eBay, and so he's taken a lot of the eBaysian concepts and applied them to microfinance with me. And that's been a really integral part. That product vision of eBay has been a really integral part of Kiva, and applying some of the same principles to poverty instead of, you know, selling Beanie Babies, for instance. And then I'm just going to go through some stories of lenders and borrowers on the site, and then I'm going to hand it over. I'm just going to give you sort of an illustration of our community and what it's like online. We have lenders all over the world in over 100 countries. This is one of them that happens to live around here. I was hoping she might be here. I don't think she is. Rose, I don't see her. If you're here, admit it. But Rose is using Kiva to make loans. She's made 110 loans. She's a mega lender at Kiva. She's a big lender, and she's a social activist. And she has her own website, her own portfolio online, where she has her own blog, and you can see what she's doing. And so she's using our site to sort of advertise that site, but also to talk about what she cares about, empowering other women, and making loans to all women, in fact. And so we have, you know, almost 500,000 people like Rose on our site now that make small loans. We have teams, so we have teams of people lending together. This is another New Orleans team. The Cerise family's not here as well. The whole family didn't come, unfortunately. But essentially what they did was one daughter gave the whole family Kiva gift certificates for Christmas, and they made a bunch of loans together, and they became a team together representing themselves as a family on the site. And right here from Louisiana. We have a Tulane team as well. So we have students at Tulane making loans on behalf of Tulane. There's only 5 of them right now, but maybe after this talk, one of y'all will join. So it'll be like 6 or 7 maybe. I'm going to look tomorrow. One of you guys join for me. Do it. They've loaned $75. That's a little, but it goes a long, long way. It makes a big impact. We also have different colleges that are rivals competing. So we have Stanford and Berkeley, big competitors out in the Bay Area, competing against each other to help alleviate poverty. It's kind of cool. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the borrowers. We work in over 40 countries with 110 field partners. And so we started in Uganda, as you see, but when we got in the press, when all that Oprah stuff was happening, when all that Time Magazine stuff was happening, we had to expand. And so we just started working with NGOs that we could trust that were really helping the poor in their neighborhood. And we expanded the idea beyond Uganda to a global brand about alleviating poverty, primarily in the developing world. So it's really neat. Kiva is a Swahili word. So when we were in Uganda, we chose to use a Swahili word that was short, that we made a great URL and had a universal meaning. So it actually means unity. So at first we were thinking this is sort of a Swahili brand. It has to be fixated on Africa. But we realized that our users thought about it more universally pretty fast, and not all of them speak Swahili. And there's actually, the word means something in about 8 languages, and it has pretty positive meanings in every language. It doesn't mean anything offensive in any language, fortunately. So it's been quite nice to universalize it to poverty alleviation in general all over the world. Just going to give you some pictures of the women on our site that are borrowing the money. This woman is in Kenya, and she's buying a hybrid goat. So I don't really know what a hybrid goat is, but it's probably more efficient than a normal goat. But what's that? They make more milk. Interesting. What is it a hybrid between? 2 different breeds? Nice. Thanks. I learn something every day. You know, I honestly did not know that. And I've given this presentation a few times. This woman's from Kenya. She's one of the first borrowers on the site. And our site used to all the borrowers used to be sort of African, primarily women, and with really small loans. And that was the first product vision of Kiva. That was the first personality of Kiva. And it's very, very popular, and our lenders still prefer to send their money to Africa with small loans primarily for some reason. And they actually prefer women way more than men for some reason. But we expanded all over the world. We worked in Afghanistan. We actually work with men. Can't believe that. This guy's a butcher, and you know, typically men are a lot less popular. Meat businesses are less popular than agriculture. But yet this guy got funded anyway, and it's a lot bigger. So in Afghanistan, $75 doesn't quite go that far. So you have to borrow, you know, $1,000 to really fund your butcher shop. Then we started working in Iraq. So we work in a lot of Muslim countries now, where often the women have to obscure their faces. Their husbands or their religion does not condone having your picture on the internet. And so we said, that's fine. You don't have to put your face on the internet. You can hide it. So a lot of them might be turning their head away. Some of them might be just using Photoshop to mask out their face. Some of them are covered in a veil. And that's working pretty well. We have this is another issue where a woman couldn't be on the site. So instead of her husband stood on the site in her place. So this is an interesting profile. We have a lot of profiles on our site that are pictures of men, but the text will describe a woman. And that's confusing. Our lenders don't know why that is. And so we have to put a note at the bottom saying, this picture is the husband of the entrepreneur. And it's culturally unacceptable in Afghanistan to put a woman on a website. So her husband stands in there. She wants to take another loan because her husband wants to improve the engine of the car and change the color of the car. but it actually paid back well. So we allow that. Here's another, this is a women-centric business started in Senegal. So this is a women's training center, vocational training, so that they can go elsewhere and start businesses. And this is a funny case where the business in Senegal actually put Kiva, that they're partners with Kiva, they actually painted that on the front of the storefront of their business. So this is a feminine training center with Kiva branded right there on it. We didn't ask them to do that, but it was a kind gesture. Here's one more story. It has nothing to do with women, but it has a lot to do with our user base. We worked in Azerbaijan, and there was this hunter on the site that was buying a gun, and he had the gun in his hand that he needed money to pay back for, and it was $1,000. And some of our lenders are really inquisitive and really smart, and they said, that doesn't look like a hunting rifle. It doesn't look like what they describe. And they said, that doesn't cost $1,000. In fact, I just went to Walmart, and you can buy that gun for $200 or $400, I forget. And so our lenders were protesting. They're very sort of sensitive to fraud, and they're very sensitive to the idea that the borrowers on the site are going to rip them off. And so what we did was we sent a volunteer, a Kiva Fellow, out to visit him, and he saw his rifle, got his hunting license, and verified that the rifle actually costed $1,000 and that it wasn't a fraud. It was actually doing what he said he was doing on the site. So our lenders are very inquisitive. They want information. They don't necessarily want their money back all the time. They're very forgiving if someone has trouble paying you back, but what they're not forgiving of is fraud. They're not forgiving of dishonesty. And so they crave that information more than money. It's really interesting. So I'm now going to turn it over to Premal, the other guy in the tux in the room. Premal was in a BlackBerry ad recently. If you go online and search for Premal BlackBerry ad, you can see him gushing about why he loves his BlackBerry so much.
Hey everyone. Okay, we're going to move past the slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about just some of the numbers behind Kiva. First of all, how many of you guys have been to the website? Okay, so not everyone here. And then I'm going to actually talk a little bit about kind of why we think Kiva is growing at this rate. So let me just say that today, you know, we're kind of, we talk almost like in baby terms, 40 months old, and we've had about 425,000 lenders lend $57 million in $25 chunks. So if you go to the website today, you can kind of lend in these increments of $25. And what's really interesting is that when we first started, and you know, we both quit our jobs, you know, hardly anyone was actually making a loan. People really weren't coming to the site. And you can see right here, this is what it was like. It's kind of depressing. No one was really coming. And we're like, oh no, we're gonna, like my parents were pissed off at me for quitting a nice job like that. Like, what are you doing? But it really started turning around when two things happened. The first is Muhammad Yunus won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2006, in the fall of 2006, and overnight the founder of the Grameen Bank kind of educated a lot of people about what microfinance and what microcredit was. And we just happened to be this website, this small little website that let you become a microlender like Muhammad Yunus. And then the second thing is PBS Frontline World did a documentary, a 15-minute documentary, and when that aired on Halloween night, our website crashed for the next 4 days, just like it was kind of a pre-Oprah event for us. And so that really got the word out about Kiva. And so now, whereas it took us about 1 year to raise the first $1 million, we do it every 10 days on the website in $25 chunks. It's really exciting what's happening here. And then the repayment rate, a lot of people ask, well, what's the likelihood of me getting repaid? And historically on our website now, we have a 97% repayment rate on the $20 million that have come to term. So it's really incredible how creditworthy the working poor are. And we can talk a little bit more about why the repayment rates are so high, why they're actually better than, for example, consumer credit card portfolios here in the US. It's an interesting phenomenon. The other really interesting thing about what we're seeing at Kiva is when people lend money, and when you lend $25 and then you get paid back usually about 10 months later, only 7% of you will actually withdraw that money back to your bank account. most of you will actually turn around and relend that same $25 that you put back in, say, 2007. You'll relend it again in 2008, and then relend it again in 2009. And as this becomes more like a movement, and as more and more people join, everyone might have a little bit of kind of a $25 or $50 kind of pool of funds that they can just kind of, over the course of their lifetime, recycle and help more and more people with the same kind of $25 that they put back when they first heard about Kiva. And that's a real powerful effect that's really starting to ramp up the loan volumes on the site. So as Matt mentioned, we're about kind of 35 employees. We're like a small business now, a small company. We're a nonprofit organization. But what makes Kiva so special is that we have an incredible amount of volunteers who help make this thing work. And I'm going to talk about ways that you can get involved as a volunteer. So 500 volunteers. And a really interesting thing, about Kiva as a nonprofit is that oftentimes you want to know, how much of my money is being used for overhead and things like that. Well, the cool thing about running a website is that you can actually run it really cheaply. You get a server hosting plan, you get a few engineers, you get a few folks who coordinate with all the field partners around the world. And so for every $1 in donations we spend running Kiva, $8 in loans have been raised on the website. So it's a really interesting kind of lesson, I think, in efficiency and what this kind of model could do in other parts of philanthropy. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So let me ask you guys a question. We can go, it's kind of choose your own adventure. I want to see which way we should go. We could talk about how many of you folks are actually thinking about starting a small business, a social enterprise, working in the nonprofit sector? Okay. Okay. And then how many of you folks would be more interested in hearing about kind of women's empowerment and its relation to microfinance? Okay, so it's kind of almost an even match. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go really fast through both. All right, here we go. So this is for all the would-be social entrepreneurs in the room, people who might think about starting their own kind of, say, a small business or a web-based enterprise. How many of you guys have heard this term Web 2.0? Pretty common, right? So we like to think that we apply 3 Web 2.0 principles to philanthropy that have really driven the growth. The first is we want to create an addictive donor experience, and I'll talk about what we mean by addictive in our website. Second is this notion of radical transparency. And third is we have really massive constraints at Kiva because we don't have a big budget as a nonprofit, but we crowdsource. We rely on the internet community, much like Wikipedia has relied on the internet community to create an incredible online encyclopedia. That's part of what drives us at Kiva. So I'll give some examples. So when we talk about addictive, to me, to create something that is really addictive on the internet, you got to make it easy plus fun. And for me, like the example of easy is like Amazon, where you can just push one click and check out. And for fun, Facebook, just an incredible, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I mean, no one, it wasn't around, right? Well, today there's 150 million people who are active on Facebook, and 45% of Facebook users log in every single day. How many of you guys log in every day to Facebook? All right, I mean, I don't know if it, fun or addiction or I'm not sure. It's just inherently very useful and very relevant to you. And we're thinking, well, how do we do this with philanthropy, with microfinance, and apply some of these principles that these companies have done. So the first thing about Kiva that we've tried to do, and this is something you guys might want to think about if, for example, like Eric has a small store downstairs, is we try to make it really easy and really, really simple. So for example, a huge photo, and you want to see your impact in human terms. Oftentimes philanthropy, you get hit with a lot of big numbers, millions and billions of dollars and huge statistics, and we want to actually make the impact very, very human. The second thing that we want to do is make it a low cost for anyone to participate. So $25, we're hoping that a 4th grade classroom, all 4th graders can bring in $1 and participate. We hope that it's not cost prohibitive and you don't have to be Bill Gates to help out. And the third thing is that you can actually, kind of find someone, make a loan to them, and be done in 3 minutes or less. And we want to make it really, really quick because we know that people are really busy, and if we made it cumbersome, it wouldn't really get folks to do it. So the other thing that we do in terms of making it fun, and I think Facebook has really nailed it, is we have a lot of rich user-generated content that's changing fast. And so, for example, on our website, we'll show that some statistics, our loans. It's really interesting. The average loan that's posted up on the website is about $500. That's what's being requested. And it gets funded on average in 1.5 days from the internet community. So it's as soon as it gets up there, you start seeing people funding it. And right now on their website, you'll see things funded in minutes or hours. Matt was mentioning that women are more popular than men on the site. Last time we checked, women get funded about 2.4 times faster than men on the site, which is a really interesting, I think, statement around people's perception of where the most social impact is, and it actually matches with the data around social impact, which I'll share in a moment. We show kind of how transactions happen, the latest transactions. You get real updates when you make a loan. One of the biggest questions is, well, I want to hear about how this business is doing. And I think what's really neat about Kiva is that, that field partner in the developing world who's actually handing out that loan to that person, when they go back and collect money, they ask kind of a few questions. How's your business doing? What are your biggest challenges? What are your biggest hopes? And then they write that down, and that might be in Spanish. It might be in French if you're in West Africa, or it might be in English. And they upload that to the internet, and then you get an email in your inbox saying, here's what's going on with your business. So in addition to getting your money back, we want to provide information on the progress or lack of progress of your loan. And then, of course, a big part of the site is actually featuring our lenders, all of us, and letting you guys kind of connect with each other and form more communities, just like the Tulane University team. We think that this is a really important part of getting this site working, and because the big problem, I think, when it comes to philanthropy is apathy. Most people know all the stats and all the conditions, but it is just so hard to get people engaged today. And so we really want to make it fun and easy. And so what's really interesting is there's a community forum, like where our users have kind of built a website, a separate website where they can discuss Kiva, all things related to Kiva. And I typed in the word addicted into this community forum, and I came up with over 2 pages of results. So one result is, I am not addicted, I am not addicted, I am not addicted. Someone was talking about that. Another woman was talking about how she wakes up at 2 a.m. in the morning to see if there's a business from a certain country on the website that she's been meaning to fund. So, I mean, it's so rare in philanthropy to get people so engaged, and this is something that we want to continue to really do at Kiva. And hopefully we'll actually scale to really make a dent in poverty. So 2 other principles that I really want to briefly mention is this notion of radical transparency. A lot of these companies like Facebook, Google, Twitter, they have their own blogs now, and they really let the community in on the decisions that they're working on, struggling with, things that they're going to launch. Kiva is trying to do the same thing, which is we want to be ultra transparent because we know we're going to make a ton of mistakes. And if we do that, then we can feel comfortable that we're being authentic about it. And hopefully that'll inspire a brand of trust. So for example, one of the biggest questions that you probably have when you donate to a philanthropy is how much of my money goes to overhead versus how much of my money goes to that end person, right? Or to the end beneficiary. Well, with Kiva, 100% of your money, if you lend $25, will go to the developing world. Kiva doesn't take a little, 10% here or 1% there. But then you ask, well, how do we pay for, the rent in that building? How do we pay to keep the site running? And what we do is we put up a screen right before you put your credit card in that says, help us pay the rent. And you can skip it, or you can kind of donate an additional 10% on top of the loan. And about 60 to 70% of our users choose to donate an additional 10%. Then that helps us cover about half of our operating expenses. So by making an explicit choice, not like, like some little hidden in disclaimers or like Ticketmaster where it's required and you hate them. Like we just want to let you, if you don't want to support Kiva, that's okay. We still want your money to get to the poor. But I think this, by making an explicit choice, gets people to really participate in the funding of Kiva and hopefully make us self-sufficient in the long term. We also let you know that sometimes things don't go right. Sometimes your money actually doesn't get to that person, or that person who says that they need $900 really only got $600, and $300 was taken by a field agent out there. And we actually want to tell you the truth in all cases. When we find it, it gets put on the website, because over time, when you see all the bad data, then you'll trust the good data. And if you trust the good data, I mean, I think the most common thing is you know, I was walking down the street recently and with my friend, and we're in San Francisco. In San Francisco, there's a number of folks who are homeless. And so it's very common to just walk by someone who's homeless. And, you know, as often is the case, just a little bit of money that you have in your pocket would actually help, right? That's theoretically what's being asked for. But why do so many people walk by people that they could directly help right in front of them? And I think it's because they don't know what's going to happen with their money. They don't know if that money is going to be used for something that will create sustainable change or not. And it's that lack of data around what happens that inhibits us from doing something very human to a human being right next to us down the street. And so I think that the thought with Kiva is if we can get people this kind of data, we will, you know, people are naturally good, inherently good, and people inherently, if they trust that the money will be used well, will actually participate. So that's a big thing that we're trying to do, is be radically transparent. And then finally, what we try to do is, Kiva on so many occasions have had no resources and an impossible task in front of us. And I think two great examples of websites that have really pulled this off is Wikipedia, when they started 8 years ago. What an incredible dream to make the sum of all human knowledge free to humanity. And to let that whole kind of encyclopedia be created by all of us. So you can go in and edit an article on Tulane University. And what's amazing is that it's actually working pretty well 8 years in. It's not the authoritative source all the time, and yes, there are errors, but it is actually one of the top 10 sites on the internet. 1 out of every 200 pages viewed on the internet is a Wikipedia page now. People are really relying on it. And think about where it's going the next 8 to 10 years. And you know how many people work there? Less than 20. It's all done by volunteers. It's an incredible site. Craigslist, 18 employees. But it's one of the top sites here in the US if you want to buy something. And you know, how do they keep things safe on Craigslist? Like if there's pornographic content or something that's illegal, you as a community member can flag it if it's inappropriate. And so they let the community, they rely on crowdsourcing or letting the community help build that site. And this has been really inspiring to us at Kiva, which is how can we let the community, all of us, help co-create this internet public good. So one of the biggest things, and this might be relevant to a lot of folks here, is how many of you have heard of the Kiva Fellows program? Okay, so like the Peace Corps program, Kiva developed a program which it's much less commitment than Peace Corps. I think you have to go a minimum of 2 years with Peace Corps. With Kiva, you can actually, if you have 10 weeks to 1 year to basically volunteer and you want to go abroad, you can actually help us train a lot of these field partners and verify the accuracy of the loan information on their site and get a real field experience in microfinance by applying for the Kiva Fellows program. And we launched this program about a year and a half ago, and about 150 people, a lot of recent college grads, some people applying to grad schools, mid-career professionals, recent retirees, people from all walks of life have been sent to 35 developing countries. And it's not something that Kiva has the money to pay for, but it seems like a lot of people, instead of studying abroad, would actually, you know, value a trip like this to actually help build Kiva. And so, you know, this is one way that we actually rely on all of us to help basically expand all around the world. Matt showed that map of Kiva expanding really quickly in all these countries in the first 3 to 4 years, and that's largely because of people like you guys who just quit your jobs or you know, take 10 weeks of your time and go volunteer in the field for us. So that's one example. How many of you guys speak a foreign language? Wow, huge. So one of the things that happens at Kiva is when someone in Senegal, when that you know, flower seller, their business is uploaded from Senegal, in West Africa, they speak French. And so that business, that story will be uploaded in French, but we have a volunteer translation program. So if you speak another language, you should look on the site. And we have over 350 volunteers who are just kind of crowdsourced translators who will, you know, they'll get a profile in French, They'll take 5-10 minutes, out of their busy day to translate it from French to English, and they push submit, and it shows up on the website. And then what's really cool as a volunteer is you can watch it within kind of minutes or hours get funded by all these people around the world, and you know that because you translated it, you were part of this process that helped, basically get money to this person eventually. And so that's another way that we've kind of tried to crowdsource. So these are some of the principles. Again, creating something that is absolutely an addictive or fun user experience, so important because people aren't really engaged. It's very hard to build a business and get to people to come. Second, being really transparent, admitting failure all along the way, and showing how you make your money and how you can stay afloat. It lets people will understand if you tell them the truth. And third, again, crowdsourcing, relying on the power of many people, just like the Barack Obama campaign did, for example, to really spread the word and grow. These are things that have guided us well. So with that said, I'm going to shift gears to actually a little bit of data around kind of the emphasis, kind of data around women and microfinance. And it's just an incredible intersection. So first of all, this is what the curve looks like. It's been growing very quickly, microfinance. In 1999, there's 10.3 million women reached by these small loans. And by 2005, where the last count was taken, 69 million. So just a huge growth in women entrepreneurs who are receiving loans to kind of start a business or fuel their business. And as Matt said, most people in microfinance who are receiving a loan are women. So basically, why women? I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of 3 reasons. One is basically for just the microfinance institutions, these banks on the ground. It's actually more sustainable or profitable to lend to women than it is to men, and I think this is really interesting. Second is, if you're a donor or a lender on the Kiva website, you're probably more concerned with the development impact. What's the social impact of lending? And the data suggests that basically lending to women actually creates much more social impact than lending to men. Really interesting data. And then finally, there's an empowerment impact that we can also talk about as well. So in terms of the financial impact, these microfinance institutions actually proactively target women because it helps them create a more sustainable institution. One, women just repay at higher rates than men do. It's in very kind of clinical terms, not to romanticize this in any bit. What researchers have found is that women tend to be a little more conservative in their investment strategy, how they plan to use the money. So perhaps less harebrained ideas and more things that would proven that would work. And so it's actually higher return there. Second is, a lot of times women, what they'll do is they'll form themselves into borrowing groups. And so instead of lending to just one woman, you lend to a group of 5 women, and they guarantee each other's loans. And because they're more vulnerable to peer pressure, so they're more likely to repay because they value their reputation more in a small village. And women are more likely to help women out more than a group of men. So that also drives up the high repayment rates. Second is, it's really interesting how women are better customers, in that men often have to immigrate from the village to the city to kind of create additional income streams. Women tend to stay in the home, and that actually makes it cheaper to serve them as a microfinance institution. And so it reduces the monitoring costs, and it also allows women to take the time to attend the repayment meetings, which are so key for microfinance. And finally, women who are actually a big part of the staff at microfinance organizations, and because they've typically been shut out of the formal sector employment in those countries that we work, they can actually work at a lower wage rate because it's a great job, great first job, and it actually lowers the cost structure for the microfinance institution. So let me talk a little bit about the development impact. So first is, we know that women, they constitute a disproportionate amount of the poor. So 70% of the world's poor, about 900 million women, is the number. Second is, they spend much more on household consumption than personal consumption. So you see a lot of data suggesting that, for example, if you give a loan to a woman versus a man, it'll translate to higher nutritional values in the home versus a man. And that actually this is probably why kind of intuitively or maybe fact-based, the internet community is actually choosing to fund women over men. And the third thing is that you see just a lot of data around not only investment in family, but that the businesses that they invest in have a high return on investment. And that's oftentimes because they're starting from a much lower base, but also because basically, here's some data, and just phenomenal data, that when you give a micro-entrepreneur a loan, the return on investment for them ranges from 29% to 236%. So these businesses are so undercapitalized, it's pretty incredible that the impact that it can make. So with that all said, let me stop there and ask Matt to come back up on stage. And we'd love to take some questions from the audience about Kiva, about where we're going. Please, go ahead. It comes from foundations and high net worth individuals. So, for example, this fundraiser that we're going to, we're going to hopefully raise money from a group of high net worth individuals, and that hopefully in 3 years we won't have to do that. That we can actually be self-sustainable through our users on the website actually paying for it and not having to go and ask for money. But for now, we need some money. Go ahead.
All right, there's a switch. Okay, if you have questions, can you please line up at the microphone? That would help. Thank you.
Okay. I actually have about 3 to 4 questions. First off, and I guess I shouldn't have raised my hand when I said I knew what microfinance was. My understanding is the lender is a donor. So the lender is not expecting any interest back, correct?
That's right.
Okay. But y'all are charging interest on the loan to the recipient?
So I'll take this. The way it works is you will, using your credit card or your PayPal account, lend $25.
Right.
And then Kiva takes that $25 and on-lends it at 0% interest, so we don't mark it up either,
Okay.
to that local microfinance institution. That local microfinance institution will charge anywhere between 10 to 40% interest rates, which sound high to us here in the States, but
Right.
given the cost of doing these small loans and the alternative, for example, the village money lender who might charge 80 to 300%, it's a fantastic deal oftentimes. And they use that money to basically cover their costs. They're bankers on bicycles who bike out to the village and hand out these small loans. And then they keep all of that, and they pass back the principal to Kiva, and then Kiva's software passes back the principal to you, and it lands in your Kiva account.
Okay. Okay. Then my second question is, when you have women requesting money and you have men requesting money, have y'all studied at all whether the women request less per request than men do, or?
I don't think we have that data, but that's a really interesting study. The cool thing about Kiva is that over 100,000 entrepreneurs now have received a loan via the website. So, this is a great research project for anyone, which is, you can take the data on the site and start cutting it in different ways to understand, draw some conclusions. That's a really interesting question.
Okay. And then my third thing is, my son participated this summer in doing some field research in India on women that received these microloans and whether they would buy health insurance. And he then, emailed back to me, and I said, well, what I as a small business owner, which is what I am, would view it as is that the charge for the health insurance was too high for what my business was generating. So do y'all deal with the health insurance?
I'll answer that. when they looked at why borrowers don't repay in microfinance, so, there's kind of a historical 95, 97% repayment rate in microfinance. Oftentimes, it's because of things that went wrong that insurance would cover here in the U.S. Your health, you die, and there's life insurance. There's a riot. There's property and casualty insurance. So insurance is actually something that's pretty nascent right now. One thing that you could imagine with Kiva one day is that in addition to making a loan, a farmer could say, hey, look, I'm planning on planting this crop, and 1 out of 5 years there's a drought, and you could create kind of an index weather insurance product on Kiva where you could say, okay, well, go ahead and plant those seeds, farmer in Uganda, and if it happens to be a bad year, I will be like the insurance carrier for you. I'll give you the money. And so there's ways that the internet community could probably bring down the cost of insurance in the years to come.
Hi. I'm wondering about this notion of free labor or crowdsourcing as it's related to new media. And it seems particularly in conflict with, at once, this idea of empowering and helping out a cohort of women, and at the same time demanding certain kinds of escalating sorts of free labor. Related to the sort of free laborers become good, sort of noble in Craigslist or Wikipedia. One of the problems with that model is that there's not a lot of regulation or consideration of sort of what that kind of labor means. So for instance, in Craigslist, where they have community flagging means you're supposed to flag for certain things, but basically in the personals, it means that men are flagging and removing women from the site from describing their bodies in non-normative ways or looking for sort of particular things. So that this labor ends up in not visible ways, creating certain kinds of oppression. So I'm wondering, given all of that, how you're working with those models in terms of Kiva.
Those are really, really relevant and important concerns. I'm just trying to think how that applies to Kiva. That's your question. We have a translation program right now. So we have about 300 translators logging in and taking something from Portuguese to English or taking something from French to English. And then we have them review each other. So one translator might critique another translator's work. I haven't seen any instances of abuse or sexism in that way, but certainly what we're doing is there's a human in between the original author and the end reader that's reinterpreting that text and putting it into English. And so I guess there's a possibility of abuse there. But then again, that's one great thing about crowdsourcing is that you have many people that can critique each other and regulate abuse. Not perfectly, but maybe better than one person. So I guess the opposite model is we could have one translator in the office that we pay. First of all, that person couldn't do it because there's thousands of things to translate every day. But even if they could, then we'd be giving that one person all this power, right? And rather than 1,000 people or 300 people. So I don't know. I don't feel like it's any more prone to abuse when you have many people versus one doing a certain task. The other way that we use volunteer labor is fellows. So we've had over 150 of college grads go to the field and do volunteer work. Just kind of how I started. That's what I was doing when I started Kiva. I was basically a volunteer in Africa, interviewing and writing about what I saw. And that's been very successful too. So those are the two main ways. Maybe you can comment back about things we should avoid while doing that. Or is there anything you see wrong with that approach?
I think when you're using that as a model, that one really needs to think about how community is empowered and the kinds of community that are informed. But I also want to just the notion of good and the notion of generosity that Kiva sort of works on and also sort of perpetuates creates some problems. I mean, there are some conceptual problems with the ways people imagine themselves and the ways they're constructing others. And I think you can see that in the kinds of representations that are happening. But
can you point to, or is there anything specific?
I think
at the conceptual level, I'm understanding.
Right.
I'm a philosophy major, and I studied. I understand at a conceptual level, but I'm trying to make it really concrete. Is there anything?
Sorry, do you have any time to talk right after the...
Sure. Yeah, I'll be here at lunch too.
Yeah, that sounds like
Yeah.
a deep intellectual conversation.
Which is not allowed. It's too deep. Let's keep it light here, guys. We're in talks.
Hi, I've got two questions. We were talking a little bit before about the Fellows program, and can you talk a little bit about the funding and how individuals go about doing that since they are volunteers, and maybe give some examples about how someone would go about doing that? And then the second question is, where do you see the future? Let's keep it going.
Okay. For the first question, we don't have the budget to pay these 150 people their plane tickets. And what started happening early on is people were just going on trips. Like someone would just say, hey, I'm going to be in Mozambique for 3 months. Can I help you out? And so it started sort of organically like that. And then we created a system, an application process, and a training and orientation. And typically a lot of them are in their 20s, right out of grad school, and they have sort of freedom to do that, so they don't have their first job yet. But we're seeing more and more mid-career professionals as workplaces become more flexible or the economy becomes worse. We're seeing a lot of people take time off and be given a sabbatical. Someone that's worked for 15 years taking a year off and then using that year to go to Cambodia and volunteer. They're creative in how they're funded. So some of the schools themselves, like graduate school programs, will fund a fellow to do that. Some of them raise money from their family and friends for a few months before they go. We just had a bunch of Google employees go, and they just emailed the Google internal list, and said, do you want to help me go to Uganda and do this work? And people gave them $5. Pretty soon they had $2,000 to pay for their plane ticket. So different ways.
In terms of the future of Kiva, I think there are 3 product turns. So right now, when you go to the website, you basically can lend to someone in the developing world, and we've shown what that looks like. But you can imagine in the future kind of 3 ways that this product. So for example, remember when Google was just search, and now it's so much more. It's got Gmail. It's got just so much more going on. Well, so you can imagine product turn number 1 is that Kiva really builds out its community. And it's a place that you can really connect, not with only people in the developing world, but people anywhere. And that's highly relevant. And so what that means is part of developing community is being able to perhaps add friends and do the things you can on social networks. Part of building community is realizing that wealth is everywhere and poverty is everywhere. So later this year we're going to launch here in the U.S. so that someone here in the U.S. who's living in poverty in need of a loan can get a loan via the Kiva website. There's just so much more just around building the community and building the relevancy for Kiva beyond just kind of me lending money to someone in the developing world and that's it. There's more. The second product turn is that we could start adding new ways of helping one another. So imagine Kiva now it's a platform for social change, and there's a number of people who are on the website. And they have some money in their accounts. You could not only maybe lend money to someone, but you could insure them. You could pay $1 for an immunization for someone's child and see who that child is. You could help fund someone's. You could provide a scholarship to someone in Pakistan and get grades and how their performance is in school. So it's this platform for social change. There's multiple lines, not just lending. And then the third product turn is something that it's a little out there, but it's basically kind of scale-driven opportunities. And what that means is you can imagine that one day, Kiva has about 500,000 people on the website, and it's about 3 years old. But what happens when it's tens of millions of people with tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in the system? There's just things that you could start doing that would create so much more impact. One example is advocacy. The next time in Congress, there's a bill that's about to approve kind of funding for HIV/AIDS in the developing world. That might be something that our users might want to know about and could actually act and call their congressperson right there. So there's kind of, those are the three product turns that we envision with Kiva. Another kind of scale-driven opportunity would be, what if all this data that's collected on the website becomes like a credit bureau for the developing world? So that woman in Kampala, Uganda, if she moves to Nairobi, Kenya, instead of losing all of her data, essentially, because she only worked with one institution that knew her creditworthiness, now her creditworthiness is on the internet, and she can actually use that to acquire a lower interest loan. So these are things that can happen once you actually hit some kind of scale.
Hi there, thanks for the great information. I would love to know how you all have changed personally and professionally with the information and statistics that you're receiving back in regard to women's empowerment and microfinancing.
Well, here's an honest answer. The reason I got into this was because I was really moved by, I'm sure a lot of us feel this, which is, I had a day job, and it was good, but there's kind of the currency of money and the currency of meaning, and I felt like my life was really missing meaning. And I had the opportunity to go to India for a couple of months and work in one of Gujarat's, that's the state I'm from, largest slums. And it was with actually a women's empowerment group. They helped do kind of business training for a group of khadi silk weavers. And it was just incredible to just become friends with them. And what I realized is I wasn't really serving anyone, but I was growing spiritually, right? So that's where I started. It's much more spiritually empowered. And then what I realized, and I bet doctors realize this, when they go into medicine, they're really motivated by doing something very noble. But then when you get into it, and this, I'm just being really radically transparent or honest with you, what's happening right now is things are becoming more and more abstract for me, because now I'm managing an organization that's doing a lot of stuff, and I'm not able to go back to India and sit with that group of women that I connected with a few years ago and feel that inspiration. In fact, now I have to wear tuxedos, quite honestly, and go to fundraisers and do that. And I'm not complaining, but I'm saying I'm distancing myself, quite honestly, via technology, via kind of people. I'm distancing myself from the original reason that inspired me to get there. So part of my challenge, the next phase for me, is probably to really, now that Kiva's seeming to grow and it's not going to fall apart, or we're not totally nervous that it's going to collapse, honestly, that maybe it's time for me to actually go back out and reconnect with the original reasons I started. And that's where I'm at right now.
I'm sorry, this is all very interesting. I know there are lots of questions, but we also have to let them raise more money so that they can continue. So this will be the last question.
It's a two-part question. First one is the criteria used to select the field agents. And second, what do you do in the case, like you mentioned, of the field agent that didn't deliver the $500 or the $800?
And what was the second part of the question?
The second one is, what action is taken with a field agent that doesn't deliver the money that they're supposed to? And last one, I want to congratulate you for your effort. You're really doing a great thing.
Oh, thanks. That's very nice. Just on that last point, okay, well, let me just start. How do we select these field partners, these microfinance institutions around the world? We have generally kind of three criteria. The first is we look at kind of the risk of the organizations, because not all organizations are kind of at a stage where you're confident that they'll be around 3 years from now or 5 years from now. So we try to understand that. Second is we look at the social impact of this organization. So we have basic social screens. What % of their clients are women? Do they measure their social impact? There's just a number of are they really targeting the poor, or is it really not the poor with these loans? And then the third is kind of fit with Kiva. We want to make sure that they're comfortable and that their clients, that the entrepreneurs that they're going to post up are comfortable with being posted up on the internet, and that there's full disclosure, that the entrepreneur's dignity is preserved, that everyone's very aware. And so those are kind of the three things that we look at. Now what we find oftentimes, well not oftentimes, but sometimes we find that even though we do upfront screening, things go wrong over time. And we see this on our website. And then that's the nice thing about making a website that's so public versus a donation where you just give money away and you don't know what happened. With a loan, if you don't get money back, you know something went wrong. And so it allows us to kind of dig deeper, maybe send a fellow out there and go, hey, what's really happening? It's okay. Imperfect credit's okay, but imperfect data is not okay. And sometimes we find that the organization may have had problems with corruption or fraud. And in that case, basically, if it's localized to just one or two bad apples within a massive organization, we basically try to rehabilitate them, because that's just a part of international development. But if it's kind of widespread fraud and total malfeasance, then we basically make it very public on our website. We email thousands of users all the time telling you that here's what happened with your money. And users, people who make these loans on our website just want to know the truth. They say, thank you for, A, thank you for telling me the truth. B, thank you for checking on my money, because that doesn't always happen in philanthropy. And we put it on the website, and hopefully people will make smarter decisions in the future, and we'll learn from it. And we're highly imperfect, but we're getting a little better each time. And so finally, thank you for clapping and congratulating us, but we really want to congratulate all you guys. I mean, it's totally all about everyone here. The fact that you guys invited us to come all the way from California to speak, we're only 3 years old and the word is spreading fast. It's amazing what we can do given technology and given kind of this energy around doing something meaningful. And so just really thank you for being a part of it and for having us here.